about to begin. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. It's gonna be bloody fun. We're gonna kill everyone. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show. With lots of blood and lots of guts. Two horror fanatics and rock and roll nuts. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show.
The Vampire and Devil Show. They're no good to me dead.
All right, like a well-experienced serial killer, the alphabet reviews continue on. Ghouls and Goblins, we're back at you, and it is time to talk about some Big D. So Devil and I, as in not that big D, because Devil might be the biggest D there is, but as far as the alphabet reviews are, we are going to get into the letter D. And Devil and I are going to talk about a movie that we've always really enjoyed. An actress is involved who I'm particularly fond of, and we are going to get into Wes Craven's Deadly Friend.
My friends are dead.
Yeah, a little BB action.
Absolutely. The one thing I will say, brother, when it comes to this movie will never, under any circumstances, be confused as a non-80s horror movie.
Yeah. This is like the epitome of 80s cheese horror camp.
Yeah. No, for sure. Like it's fun from top to bottom. It's kooky. It's kind of like it starts off the first third of the movie is kind of like, it's very like Short Circuit, which is kind of fun because it's like, it seemed like in the 80s people kind of got a little bit into like their robots when it came to movies, but then it kind of morphs a little bit into like
Wonder.
Small Wonder. Yes, that was it. So yeah, it kind of has this like, Short Circuit meets Small Wonder thing, but then you just dumped a bucket of blood on it. So
yeah, for sure.
It's definitely fun.
Yeah, there was definitely a thing for robots in the 80s. Like you were saying, the Short Circuits, you got RoboCop, you got Terminator, you got, like I said, you got the movie Daryl that was really cool. You had that Small Wonder coming out. Yeah, it was definitely like, because it was like, the 80s was that beginning of, modern technology and technology getting a lot better. So, of course, the robots had to come out, and when the robots are free, people start dying.
And I guess technically Transformers would be part of that as well, because that was a big popularity cartoon that happened still dealing with technology.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Except we got horror robots in this one.
Horror robots, that we definitely do. And so the movie basically has that traditional design of kind of, boy likes girl, besties that kind of become lovers, kind of a thing, dealing with their own just individual personal bullshit that doesn't like so much interfere with each other. It's just, you got Paul, who's more of like the traditional, like, I guess happy lifestyle to a certain degree. His mom is still a single parent, but he still is more of like on the straight and narrow kind of a thing, where you've got, he's really smart in school. He's learning to be like a neuroscientist, and he excels in all this stuff, and he's an inventor, where his the movie kind of starts off where you're introduced to his basically like pet robot, which is like, what was it? BB?
BB.
BB? Bibu or something?
BB.
BB. And that's just kind of the way it is. You've got Paul with his friend, and BB is like his sidekick and single mom, but everything kind of seems on the straight and narrow. And then their third friend, Sam, who's like the next door neighbor, is still part of like the clique. And while she doesn't seem to be like, she still seems to overall be enjoying her life to a certain degree, because, you know, they're playing basketball, they're going to school, they're doing whatever. She's got like the alcoholic, abusive father that, you know, where it's kind of a, you know, it's kind of a sketch when it comes to, like, you know, it's kind of a front when she's out and about. She still enjoys her time with her friends, but inside she's getting yelled at, getting cussed at, you know, having all these crazy dreams, you know, about how whacked her father is. So inside of closed doors, it's definitely a sad situation. So you can definitely see that her hanging out with her friends is like her great escape.
Yeah, yeah, and again, she's played by the lovely Christy Swanson that we love from, you know, movies like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Have you seen that one yet? It's
Oh,
amazing.
oh yeah, absolutely. Love me some Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
Take a back seat, Sarah Michelle Gellar. It's all about Christy Swanson, Luke
Oh,
Perry,
yeah.
David Arquette. I mean, dude, your beloved Paul Rubens.
Yep, yep. And then, you know, like typical fashion with Chrissy Swanson, you know, we were talking about, you know, her abusive, you know, piece of shit father in this movie. She was in Flowers of the Attic with an abusive piece of shit mother.
Right.
So maybe this is why the mother is not in the picture. She's part in the attic maybe right now or something. Who knows?
Right.
But yeah, yeah. And the crazy thing, you know, we're talking about BB, the robot. Yeah, like he's just this crazy, cool, invented robot that goes around and he's got his own mind. He's not being controlled. It's all like, you know, AI pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, people are like, no way, and he can do stuff. He can pick locks. There's a time where these like kids, well, not kids, they're like grown adults. I don't know why they're bullying a bunch of kids, but you had them bullying a bunch of people, and the robot grabs the dude's nuts and was like, yeah, he can squash these things easier than no shit. And the whole entire time, BB's just doing all this cool stuff, but he also kind of can talk to a little bit. His stuff is it's very gibberish, very. But the cool thing about it is it's actually voiced by the guy who does Roger the Rabbit,
Yeah.
who was Roger Rabbit's voice actor, which was like pretty crazy that Roger Rabbit now is a killer robot.
For sure. And it's interesting. I mean, yeah, Paul does have like a little clicker, like you see in this one scene that kind of leads to what sets up the actual movie, which we'll discuss shortly. But yeah, he's got that little clicker to like kind of suggest certain things, or maybe be like, well, I can't have you doing that, so let's like pause you or mute you or whatever. But the other thing that's kind of crazy about BB, which it makes you think something at first, and then it is kind of like not a thing for a minute, is it almost looks like we're going to get a kill in like record time in this movie. It's like 25 seconds into this movie. Like you basically just see this creepy dude looking in through the window of a car, breaking into the car to steal this lady's purse, and then a robotic arm just grabs him by the throat and starts choking him, but then lets him go as he hears like the other voices, which is Paul and his mom returning back to the car.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely little parts of BB that seem like maybe his wires are a little mixed, and he's a little he gets angry and or violent real quick. I mean, they're playing basketball, and he tries to shoot a hoop, and he throws it too far and goes into the neighbor's yard. Played by Mama from the Goonies. I love her. But yeah, she's the craziest woman in the entire 80s. That's how you could tell this is an 80s movie. Just throughout
Elvira.
this, yeah, by the whole entire time in this movie, she keeps threatening these kids with shotguns and shit. Shoots the freaking shotgun, and yet nobody is getting sued. No cops are getting called. The kids aren't going to their parents and saying, "Hey, crazy lady just pulled a shotgun on me." Where nowadays, shit, you can pull a freaking fake water gun at somebody and you're getting sued at now.
I know, seriously. But yeah, so they're trying that's basically the precursor to, as the movie morphs into what we know it to be, is they're playing basketball. BB throws the basketball too far and it lands in the creepy lady's yard. It's all locked up and they're debating on who's going to go get it, and they try to go in. Lady comes out and yells at them, takes their ball away and throws it in the house and shuts the door, and they're like, what the hell? And then just, fast forward to Halloween, because the movie kind of takes place probably over an overall span of about 2 months. It's kind of the lead up to Halloween, which is the first major thing, and then you see that like Thanksgiving's kind of a thing. Not like it has like any particular value on the movie. You can just see that there's like kind of a Thanksgiving-ish looking spread at one point. But yeah, so they decide that they want to kind of fuck with the old lady or get their ball back on like Halloween, because they're shaving, creaming cars and messing around with stuff, and try to go in. Sam tries to break in, and this giant alarm goes off after BB picks the lock, and sure enough, just like you said, Devil, she comes out just shotgun in hand and just blows BB to just pieces, just shrapnel off the base. I mean, it is pretty crazy. And of course, that shatters Paul's world, because this is like his creation, almost kind of his son to a certain degree. So that's the craziest thing about that. But also at the same time, like we talked about with, what Sam, Christy Swanson's character, was dealing with, is she's dealing with her abusive father who's giving her nightmares. And there's this really wacky scene where like her father's looking at her very kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of pedo-y, and she's trying to fight him off and stabs him with a vase, and all he does is basically laugh it off as like the blood is coming like through this vase just all over her, just covering her with blood, and he's basically laughing it off like, you can't kill me, while she's just getting completely covered in this blood, and then wakes up to find out that it's all a dream.
Yeah, it's that scene reminds me, it's very, I mean, with Wes Craven, obviously, it's very Freddy Krueger-ish.
Yeah.
Where it's just like comical horror, like, oh yeah, you like that kind of, the whole entire time he's like just pouring blood all over off his face and like pulling these like kind of one-liners out. And it was very, like Freddy Krueger, or even like, like very Wes Craven, comedy horror. Written. It's pretty nuts. But like you were saying, like with the with her shooting BB with the shotgun, still again, I mean, I understand that, this was on her property and stuff like that, but still nothing, no cops are being called, no parents are going, hey, you shot a gun, even though you shot a robot, you shot a gun near my kid, you could have hit my kid and killed my kid. You're nothing. Like, they're just like, oh, okay, yeah, they're just the next day, they're like, all right, BB's dead, got
Happens
shot by
all
the
the
neighbor.
time.
Oh, okay, that's just a Tuesday.
Right.
Welcome to the Welcome to the 80s, kids.
Yeah, that's just Elvira for you. That's just what she does. She just shoots shotguns at things.
Yeah. It's it's just so crazy how like nonchalant things were, in the 80s versus how it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that basically also leads up to the big turn of this movie, which is, he's got the pieces of BB, and the situation with Sam and her father keeps getting worse, because she's spending time with Paul, because they like each other and they have their first kiss or whatever, and she's coming back in, and Dad's like, why aren't you here? Like, go to your room. Like, you're so disobedient. Like, blah, blah, blah. And ends up shoving her down the stairs, and she cracks her head on the door frame and ends up basically going into a coma that they unfortunately ultimately end up, taking her off life support.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because the whole entire time, like, like she's fighting for her life, and the old man, like, there's no remorse for him. He's just like, pull the plug. I don't care.
Yeah.
And
even when the paramedics were there, he's like, I told that like stupid kid to pick up her toys, like not, or she wouldn't have tripped and fallen down the stairs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it's crazy. And then it leads into the idea of, I know what I'm doing. I'm a scientific nerdy dude. I'm gonna implant this computer chip into Sam's brain and kind of control her like I did with BB.
Yeah. And his mom basically being like basically a nurse, or at least like working in that medical field in some way, in some way, because he's just got access to like everything. I mean, he's got keys, like he just knows like where to go, what to do, and has like already scoped everything out and finds out where, Sam is lying, and he gets this idea. He's like, well, this chip controlled the AI brain of my robot. Why couldn't it work for a human? Like you said, yeah, I'm a smart guy. I've been excelling in my like neuro, science class, or however it is, and so he ends up, bringing her out in like a laundry-ish bin, because they like originally are like taking in like batteries to like jumpstart her with this, to find out that they've already pulled the plug and she's already died. So they just kind of take her out in the laundry bin back to the old school, like, 80s style turtle van.
Yeah.
And bring her home and cut off the sutures that they were already there from a previous brain surgery when the doctors were trying to save her, and just installs the little platform with the little, needle like wires into her brain, and then adds in the chip and charges it up. And at first you're not totally sure, but all of a sudden she's alive.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very, Frankenstein-ish. It's definitely like the comedy part of it too, where like, I think she's alive, man. I think I've seen her foot move, and the best friend's like, no, I think you're just seeing shit. And then her leg completely moves, and he completely passes out from freaking like being scared to death by her and stuff like that. Yeah, and then Christy Swanson, Sammy's back, but she's like, has like the mind of a robot very much, and that's probably like one of the funny parts and cool parts, but yet like 80s camp parts is like the way her fingers are stuck, kind of like how a robot is.
I
And
hate
Chrissy Swanson is all walking around so much like and having her hands like it's so over the top. I mean the makeup. I love her makeup though.
Me
Like
too.
the black and kind of sunken eye looking,
Got a
and like
blue.
kind of bluish tint face.
Yeah.
Because she already had already died, so so that kind of makes, yeah. But the whole robot fingers and kind of walking like a robot, it's kind of funny. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, the walking didn't get me that much. I hated the hands so much. It was so distracting, like just so obnoxious. It's easy to like not overreact too much about it, because I'll be transparent about it. Like I kind of do get it, because we also addressed it. Well, we didn't address the physicalness of it, but when we talked about the early potential kill of BB's hand grabbing the robber's throat, basically BB's hands were that of kind of like a lobster. It was kind of that very 80s kind of circular C clamp kind of thing. So to a certain degree, like I do kind of get it, since technically she's got BB's brain. And that's how BB was used to grabbing things. So like I kind of get it. I just really hated it though, because at the same time, when it's being done in the 80s, by at the time, like a 15, 16-year-old girl that isn't going to be as used to doing that kind of stuff in real life, like it was so awkward. The movement didn't really bother me, kind of had that fun, almost Styx-ish Mr. Roboto feel to it. So I get it. That part was okay, but I really did hate the hands. And while I do understand in continuity of the reason why she probably did it that way, it was just kind of over the top, and I really kind of hated it. But I did love the makeup. There was a little bit of continuity error that I did see at that, because at first when they bring her back and bring her to life, and she's got those deep set, like, black into blue eyes, then like the next scenes you kind of see her and it's actually much lighter.
Yeah.
And kind of like, I feel like it wouldn't be healing away like that. If anything, it would be getting worse. I feel like it would have made more sense for the bluish gray or whatever to be lighter and then become darker. But it went from being like pretty dark and black and blue to being kind of lighter, but then being the normal black and blue for like the rest of the movie. And again, that's just me just nitpicking little things about it. But, you know, that's also kind of something we do on this show. But so that also kind of leads into this, similar to BB, that kind of protective mode where, first of all, the first thing that Sam's going to do is get back at the man that did this to her. And the first real kill of the movie is the death of her father, basically starting off as like what looks like it's going to be burned alive, but ends up breaking his neck in, frankly, a very comical fashion.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those where you're talking about her hands and why she kind of does this. That was another thing that was kind of odd. I didn't quite get was I know she's got BB's brain, and so a lot of the stuff that she's gonna do is very in a robotic realm, but she's got this super ultra strength, which makes no sense because the robot was super strong, but that's because the robot's got titanium arms and shit and
Right.
has like, you know, torque and shit. Where she's just a normal 16-year-old girl, but can lift her father like up in the air, completely in the air, and break his neck. And yeah, the strength that she has throughout this whole entire movie with the kills and stuff like that always made me laugh because it's like like I said, I don't understand how that chip made her like freaking Arnold Schwarzenegger all of a sudden.
It really was strange because, yeah, I mean, you know, there is common real life occurrences of, you know, what they call, you know, spectrum strength. And, you know, that's talked about in movies. And you also do see that in real life. This was just that, like, it's cool. It makes for some good kills, but it's so not believable because the bottom line is she's still a 16-year-old girls of just like, you know, 16-year-old muscle and bone, and now all of a sudden, exactly, she's like Stallone, and you're just like since when is that a thing? But after the demise of her father comes our favorite kill.
Yeah, which I mean, I know we were just bitching about the strength of her and her character, but this kill is kind of a tribute to her strength, but it makes it one of the most iconic kills ever. So obviously, she's on her path of revenge from from her life. She kills her father and parts of the robot's life, and then remember the next door neighbor being such a bitch that they're gonna play her a little mind, go to the house, and I remember you stealing a basketball of mine. Now I'm gonna throw this basketball at ungodly speed, and I'm gonna smash it against your head and basically make your head look like scanners. It just explodes into
got
pieces.
Shot with a cannon.
Yeah, I mean it's the coolest thing ever. We were talking before, but yeah, I mean if you haven't seen this movie, or if you've seen this movie and you own it on DVD, watch that scene and literally pause it and go frame to frame. It is actually pretty cool. It's like they like legitimately. I'd imagine they probably had her face casted as something like a pumpkin and kind of like blew something up, man. But it's pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
Like it rates up there as probably one of the best kills I've seen in all the movies that we've talked about. It's probably up there as one of the top ones because it's just so crazy. But like I said, but then the basketball bounces like all that pressure that it's able to explode ahead, but yet not not do any damage to the ball.
Right. No, for sure. I mean, it's easily in my top 5 kills of the 80s and still in my top 10 kills of all time when it comes to horror movies. It's just so good because we poke fun or point at little things about difference in technology, different in like physical, special effects, practical special effects versus like CGI stuff. But I mean, everything, with the exception of the fact it's a basketball that survived the impact, like I said, the reaction of it is pretty much like that of being shot with like a cannonball. And I mean, it is believable for kind of what the damage would cause, if not for the fact that it's being done by technically a soft object.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
it's crazy. I mean, I guess the sheer force of how fast and hard she can throw this thing
yeah.
basically kind of just did all that damage. But then again, goes back to her not being able to throw that hard to begin with anyway, because like I said, just because she's got the brain of a. But yeah, I mean, I like it. Like I said, it's awesome. You know what I mean? The cheesy kills in this movie are good.
They definitely are. And as like a fun little thing like that we talked about off the air, but we'll laugh a little bit about with our fangs, is the fact that like as Elvira's body hits the ground, you just clearly see the rib cage area of her body just deflate down to the ground. It's just so weird because, you know, the actress who plays her who's been in many movies, she's no longer with us, but, you know, she's that average kind of thick old woman type body frame. That's just the way that she is. So, like, you know, a person like that lying on the ground, you're going to expect them to have a certain body arc. And you've got, like, you know, it literally goes like, you know, you've got the chest, breast kind of area, and then it just plummets down to like the ground and then kind of comes back up for like the stomach. And it's like somebody stepped on her, like stepped on an inflatable like toy and left the imprint on there. It's just, it's just funny. It's just goofy. Again, it's 80s camp, it's 80s cheese. It's not worth like, you know, shooting down the awesomeness of the kill over a minor technicality. It's just goofy shit. That stuff like you and I are going to notice.
Yeah. It's awesome. But then, you know, she gets that kill and she starts, you know, he starts realizing that maybe this wasn't the best idea to resurrect a dead girl that you kind of like, and putting your dead, you know, robot brain into your girlfriend's brain. So it's like one of those things like, oh God, I kind of created a monster now. And, you know, now, and you can't kind of stop her, and she's on this warpath, and eventually, you know, it comes down to, you know, they find the neighbor dead, then they find the father dead, and the cops are figuring out what the hell's going on. They see Sam, and they're like, what the hell? Like, this girl was dead.
Well,
Now,
a neighbor claims that saw Sam up in a window.
Yeah.
They're all like, she's dead. She's been dead for 2 weeks or whatever. Like, that couldn't possibly be her.
Yeah. Then, like I said, then all of a sudden she comes out and the cops see her, and I kind of feel like in my opinion, I kind of feel like she went after the cops on purpose.
Yeah.
She kind of knew that she didn't want to live, you know, the way that she was kind of living right now with this brain, you know, with the computer brain. So she kind of decides to go all finger cops to the cops with your good finger thing going again, where she's all with her fingers all jacked up. And you know,
The fucking
cop killer.
Yeah, well, because it's weird because like Paul's kind of trying to make her run away, but she's also still pretty protective. Because one thing that we haven't really touched on real quick is there is this kind of, you know, tension triangle, because you've got Paul, who was like really happy to have Sam back with this experiment, but is seeing everything that's going wrong. But then you've got the best friend who like doesn't want to be a part of this because he doesn't know how to handle people being murdered and the fact that this dead person is now back alive. So there's tension now between Paul and his mate, and they get into like a little scuffle and stuff like that. But, you know, then Sam runs away. Paul's kind of looking for, then the bully comes back and is picking on Paul. And then there's Sam to the rescue, which leads to what you were just talking about at the demise, which is another kind of campy, like, kill or injury. It's not really clarified, like, whether or not the bully's killed or not. But she picks him up, like WWF style, and just awkward still frame torpedo throws him into the windshield of the cop
Yeah.
car. And that's what leads to the final like death scene of it. And it's just really weird. And it's strange too, because like the cop shoots Sam and kills her. Paul's in agony, like kind of holding her head kind of thing. And you just see the rest of the cops just kind of wander off like, well, all right, case closed on that one. Let's go get coffee and a donut. It's just weird. You just kind of see them, they're not inspecting anything. They're not running to check on the bully again. They're not like taking out their notepads and writing down incident reports. They just kind of wander off, almost hands in their pocket style. It's kind of bizarre.
Yeah, they're probably like, okay, this bitch already died once, and I'm not gonna do more paperwork on this one, so we're just gonna pretend like this shit didn't happen, and let's just go. Let's go. Get some donuts
Seriously.
and go shoot some other kids. Wait.
It's like, okay, I didn't have this night on my bingo card, but at least it's nice to know that the game is over now, kind of a thing. And so leading up to where we want to rank this and leading up to the obituaries is the final scene where it's, Paul still not like fully willing to give up Sam, I would say. Again, he's visiting her in the hospital. And this is a very strange ending to this movie because you and I talk regularly, and we're about to talk again about potential sequels. And all of a sudden, you kind of would expect with like an AI kind of theme that isn't really necessarily done. Because, yeah, she was shot in the stomach, but it's her brain with a microchip that caused everything to begin with. So it's believable that she wouldn't have perished from that. But then all of a sudden, she wakes up. She starts strangling Paul, and all of a sudden her face and arms are melting off, revealing like a metal yellow masked skull with like sharp teeth and like, arms and, electrical pipe arms like coming off the skin, as all she just kept saying over and over, even through the credits, is, beep, beep. And it kind of leads into that. Could there be a sequel? Sure. I guess it's technically possible. If anybody's familiar with the more recent movie Megan, they have greenlit a sequel for that, and I'm curious to see it because I really liked Megan. But at the same time, for any of us that have seen the movie, it doesn't make a ton of sense that there would be another Megan movie, at least not of the same name. But anyway, to keep it back on Deadly Friend, it was just this very weird, just melting skin coming off to reveal the robot that she is, which explains some of her powers, I guess, when it came to abilities and kills throughout the movie, but then makes literally no sense whatsoever that a bullet to the gut would have taken her out, when all it probably would have done was just simply either gone through her or just ricocheted off to the side.
Yeah. So apparently that ending was so while they were making the movie, I guess the people who were financing the movie, I can't remember what company it was, but the head of that is the guy who wrote this, and everybody hated it. But then again, you don't say shit to the guy who's got the money producing and financing your film. So they decided to do this, and like I said, everybody who talks about this ending is the dumbest ending that makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah, like you said, she's got a robot chip. She's not a robot in person. She's a regular person.
Yeah.
She just has a robot chip in her brain. So her coming back as a robot, with the robot coming out of her skin, was just like that made absolutely no sense. And apparently, it made no sense to people back then, and there was like I said, Wes and the other people were like, yeah, you can't really argue with the guy who's gonna finance or and distribute this movie. We're like, whatever. And then and in all honesty, this movie flopped. in the theaters.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it was because of that. Eventually, this movie got a very good cult following, and now has got, is a lot bigger now. But when this movie came out, yeah, it bombed. And like I said, I mean, granted, yeah, you have that, you have the '80s cheese, but that was during the '80s, so you didn't realize the '80s cheese nearly as much. But I think a lot of I think the ending definitely hurt the movie a lot.
Yeah.
For a while until people just started seeing how like ridiculously stupid that ending was. Now it's a little bit more like, okay, cool, we can accept it now. But back then they were like, no.
Yeah. I mean, we're fans of the cult following. We like the movie. We're fans of it. We like the cast. But I know for a fact that if you and I had seen that movie in the theaters back then, that the credits would have hit and you and I would have just kind of been looking at each other like, wait, what? How is that a thing? Like,
Yeah.
so, I mean, it's one thing for like movies about like an alien or something like that maybe morphs over time, or something like Jurassic Park that's, morphing from an egg to an animal to what it becomes. It's one thing for like real biological changes that make sense, but for a human to only have a microchip put in their brain to then somehow find a way to morph fully into a robot on its deathbed after literally being a human all the way up until like maybe an hour before that is just makes completely no sense. Like, it's one thing for us to joke about goofy little continuity errors, but that's just on a complete level of why would you have ever thought that would have been a good idea?
Yeah, exactly.
I would have probably left it as maybe the arms come up or the movie fades to black for credits, but you keep hearing like the beep beep robot voice. I would have left it that way, because that again is more believable, because it's not like she was shot in the head where the bullet might have hit the chip. She was shot in like the gut. So like, based off the strengths, the powers, the however you want to look at it, I guess it would be believable that she would have survived that shot. But yeah, suddenly turning fully into just metal, like exoskeleton or like endoskeleton style, nah, you don't you don't get that one.
Yeah, I kind of, and like you were saying, with sequels and stuff like that. I mean, I'm actually for not a sequel, because I think a sequel to this movie would just be completely stupid. I'm actually for a remake. I think with modern technology now and how crazy, like you were talking about how Megan was and stuff like that, that it would be a cool movie to see, like, modern technology and modern robot and AIs and things that we think that they can do now versus what we thought they could do in the 80s. I think it'd be kind of interesting to see a new kind of a new spin on this movie. So, as far as, like I said, I don't think it will ever be better than the original, but I think if it's done by the right person, I think a remake of this movie would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'd be down for it. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't want a sequel because I wouldn't get it. I don't think anybody really would. But a remake, a retelling, I would be down for that. And if I had a say in it, I would like Christy Swanson to be cast as the mom.
Yeah.
I just think it'd be cool. Just have that little bit of like, full circle kind of fun thing, because it's always a movie that's been around. It's always a movie that like has been known in her catalog or simply known of. It's just whether or not people really gave it much of a talk, which was more of the thing. Yeah, the cult people are down, but average horror person's not. They might know the name because of Wes Craven, but they're probably not really gonna know, because of course Christy went on to kind of break out as Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Then other fun roles. She was Vanessa in Big Daddy. She was Chrissy Boner in Dude, Where's My Car? Kind of fell off the grid a little bit, but then she kind of had that resurgence, of like getting back into the public eye, getting her career back kind of a thing, and she's stayed active ever since. You and I have met her at Monster Mania Con, and she's an absolute sweetheart. So I would like, if this movie was tackled by somebody, I would love them to find a place, preferably a quality role for Christy to be in that movie as like a little nod, because I just think it'd be cool.
Yeah, for sure.
They don't owe it to her. They don't owe it to us. I just think it'd be rad.
Yeah, I agree. That would be interesting to have her kind of play like you said, playing the mother or something like that would be kind of cool. Or maybe she's the neighbor that's the bitch or something like that, and she's the one that gets killed by by a basketball or whatever they decide to do.
Getting killed by herself.
Yeah.
No, that would definitely be pretty cool. So let's talk a little bit about where we rank this for kills. Let's talk about the obituaries. So for me, honestly, it's short and sweet. I love this movie. I always have. It's so fun. I'm a fan of the cast, and of course, I'm a big Kristy Swanson fan. But in reality, it's goofy, it's 80s, it's campy, it's so weird and not thought out well in a lot of places. So I would love to see a retelling. I think that would be awesome. But the kills are epic. The overall feel of the movie is very fun. It's very flirty. It's what you expect. It's very Wes Craven, just like you pointed out. Like the comedy, especially the nightmare scene with the vase tube just covering her in blood for pretty much what is kind of no reason, is very Freddy, very Wes Craven, even very Scream. But, if as much as I would love to give this something up there like a 7.5, it's the little things that make no sense that hurts this movie. Do I think this is a movie that a person could watch multiple times? Sure. I think it's definitely enjoyable. It's not long, and it doesn't feel long. It's overall an enjoyable time, and it's a movie that I could see somebody watching more often than not. It's a movie that I've watched plenty of times, and it was great to revisit for this. But, as much as I'd love to give it a 7.5, it's really a 6 for me, but I'm going to give it a 6.5 as my final number because I just love the kills.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like I said, for me, yeah, it is a movie that I've watched. I probably watch it every, at least a couple times a year. Like, I always come back to it. Like I said, other than Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Flowers in the Attic, it's probably my favorite Kristy Swanson movie. Like, just in general, I like her in this movie. I think like I said, the robotic hands and the robotic movements are fun because it's stupid. It's just like, okay, now hey, Wes is on the side. Okay, you got a robot brain. Okay, I'm gonna start moving like this. I was waiting for her to start talking like, hey, how are you doing? Kind of thing. But I was like, it's camp, but it's camp in a good way. Like I said, I think a lot of the kills, like I said, are quality kills. It's got like over the top like cheesiness. I love the like you said, you don't even have to say this movie's in the 80s, and you can tell it's an 80s movie just because it's like it just screams 80s regardless. So it's like, yeah, for me, I mean, I give it a little bit higher than a 6.5. To me, like I said, I don't think it's definitely not like an Oscar winning performances, and by any means, it's definitely not going to win any major awards.
Yeah.
Or anything like that. But like I said, it's a fun movie that is enjoyable, and you can watch, and you can watch it over and over and over again. And like I said, it's just it's a good time to watch. So for me, I think a 7. I think 7 I think is a good plateau for that.
I'm cool with that, bro. We can definitely go with a 7 for that because, again, like the Fangs, no, we don't do 0.25s or 7.5s. We'll just automatically go 7 on this one because the thing is, I'm down for all your points, and I love Kristy Swanson, and the kills are great. Yes, I hated the hands. I hated the robotic movements because it's like she's still a human with regular joints. And then to turn into a robot at the end makes no sense to me. But the bottom line is, yes, like I said, I enjoy it. You enjoy it. We enjoy it. It's fun. It's campy. So I'm down with it, bro. We'll round it. 7 is the way that it'll be for Deadly Friend. And that's how it's going to be on the obituaries. Wes Craven's Deadly Friend, 7. Spoken by the devil and the vampire. Horns up. Bangs out.
Hey, what's up there, killer kitties? You better be watching the Vampire and Devil podcast, or I'll come and see you sometime. What's up? This is the Devil here with another quick movie review. Just got done watching the 2020 movie Possessor with Jennifer Jason Leigh in that movie. It's a pretty crazy movie about going into someone's mind and brain and controlling them from another side. And then what happens when you possess way too many people and your mind goes crazy. It was pretty cool. I liked it. You should go check it out.
All right there, ghouls and goblins, spooks and creeps, what's up? It is time for yet another showdown. We know how much you guys like it. We got vampire here. We got devil there. We are going to have a nice little throwdown, showdown, where we're going to talk about a couple of movies that are remakes, but are of an upper tier remake. You know, some might say they're better, some might not feel that way. But in myself and Devil's Eyes, we're going to talk about a couple of movies that are remakes that we do find to be of a higher quality than what you typically get when it comes to a remake.
Oh, yeah. We've already, if you've watched the show, we've always got our disdain of remaking movies sometimes. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, sometimes they just don't need to be done. And, why did you remake these movies? Why would you do this? These two movies, you can put your hat into saying why or no, but in our opinion, and we think that these two movies are the cream of the crops, the top of movies that have been remade that are at least as superior as the original ones.
Right, absolutely. Because that's the thing. Because, I mean, especially in our community, like, it just seems like Hollywood is just fucking struggling for ideas. And I really don't think that's the case. I don't know if it's a matter of they're just unwilling to take risks, look into, certain directors that look like they are doing original ideas and stuff like that, whether it's be writing or directing, or if they just are just kind of over it and looking at certain things like cash grabs. Like, there's definitely original idea people who we definitely love. We like Eli Roth. We like the Soska sisters. And the Soska sisters have a remake under their belt in Rabid, but that doesn't take away from, fun debut stuff like Dead Hooker in a Trunk, or even the sequel that they were brought on for when it came to See No Evil. But then you've also got Eli Roth, who I think is just pretty much burst on the scene as like what I felt was a very high profile, new director with original ideas. And again, depending on how you want to look at it, you can kind of say he even has a remake under his belt in the Green Inferno from Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah. I mean, it's an unofficial remake. I would imagine it's probably called, because it's not really a remake, but I mean, it's basically following the same storyline, same pattern, same themes. I mean, I myself consider it a remake, but I guess maybe he might not have wanted to be considered a remake, or maybe he didn't have the rights to remake it, or because of all the legal problems they had making the original one, maybe he didn't want it to consider it a remake.
Right. No, for sure. Where it's kind of, I guess he always kind of described it as his tribute to Cannibal Holocaust, because he was always very open about just how much he loved that movie, and this is kind of his answer to, or his tribute to. But we're going to pit two of what we find to be high tier remakes, as it would be, and we are pitting my Maniac against your Night of the Living Dead. So we're definitely going to have some fun with this one, brother. So let's jump into it. Why don't we kick it off with Maniac?
Maniac, maniac.
That one's from 2012. It's more recent. Of all people starring as the Maniac, as the serial killer, we've got Elijah Wood, who debuted in like Back to the Future Part 2. A lot of people know him when he was still a child actor for movies like North, but then he's got more unique roles after the big break, which of course was Lord of the Rings. But then he had a lot of very unique roles that he would do where you could see him getting adventurous with his choices, where you had his appearance in Sin City, you had Green Street Hooligans, and a lot of just very, very unique choices for where he's since wanted to take his career. So Elijah takes on the role of our maniac, our serial killer.
Yeah. It's like, you'd think about it, if you're not a huge fan of Elijah Woods, or not like deep diving fan of Elijah Woods, yeah, you would think this is a movie kind of out of his wheelhouse. And like I said, yeah, if you think of some of his bigger movies like The Lord of the Rings and those kind of movies, yeah, this is completely different. But like you said, him being in Sin City in this movie is really not much of a difference. He was a serial killer type character in Sin City, and he's our main guy in this movie that has an affection for women, and chopping them up, and cutting some heads there, and playing with mannequins. He likes the mannequins.
Yep, absolutely. And so that is what is based off the original movie, which came out in 1980, which is basically about this, maniac serial killer obsessed with mannequins, almost very Jeffrey Dahmer style for anybody who's familiar with the behavior that Jeffrey Dahmer used to do. But he would kill these girls, scalp these women, put their wigs, so to speak, on these mannequins to give them that what he felt was that real life, look and feel to it. Now, the one thing I found to be very cool about 2012's Maniac, the current Maniac, the one that we're specifically discussing, is while there's a lot of similarities, of course, to the original one, it was much more of a fresher take. So I found it to be very cool where, yes, it's a remake, 100% it is, but it has a little bit more, in my opinion, standalone behind it, where because the big thing that was panned by a lot of people, but also loved by a lot of people in the horror community, was where 1980s Maniac was a traditional slasher style movie, like shot that way. This is more of a point of view. The majority of the kills that Elijah does is from his eyes, where it feels like you or I are doing the killing, which I thought was a very interesting thing for doing it. Because the funny thing is like the director of the movie isn't so much known for doing horror per se, as far as like that name, where they dabbled in it. They did P2 and other movies like that. But then you've got the writers of the movie who are incredibly established, where they opened up as the writers for High Tension. And it doesn't get much more like initial stamp of approval for a debut. But then they did do some remakes that we actually did consider, stuff like The Hills Have Eyes. But anyway, getting back to 2012's Maniac, it was shot from the point of view of the killer, which is different to the original, which I thought was a very bold choice, but very cool because it really broke down that intimacy and really put the knife in your hands, so to speak.
Yeah. It was just a cool, and like I said, it's an interesting way of doing it because it's more of like you're kind of seeing it through his eyes and seeing like the craziness that he's doing. And like I said, even when you're watching this movie, you really don't. I think it's like 10, 15 minutes into the movie where you first get to see Elijah's face. You don't even know what he even looks like. He's like throughout the whole, because the whole beginning of the movie is, like you said, shot through the point of view of him. So you're just kind of seeing this dude, and you're like, okay. And that's the thing about this one versus the original one is that, not saying that Elijah Wood is the best looking guy in Hollywood right now, but he is a lot better looking than the original the actor who played him. So yeah, so this one makes a little bit more sense to that, where women, even though he is, crazy, he's got a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder stuff. He is a maniac. He is obsessed with these mannequins. He is a decent-looking guy, which understandably why some of these women would be attracted to him. Plus, Elijah Woods isn't a big menacing dude. He's on the shorter side. So they're probably like, okay, I'm safe with this guy. He is a very safe looking guy, where the original killer is a big kind of brooding big dude. He's a little bigger than Elijah Wood. So that's I like the difference in this version versus the old one, because this is what made more sense of why these women would have gone, where he wanted to go or did things with him.
Yeah, I felt like the guy who played the original Maniac, because he definitely had more of that classic 70s 80s big man look, but honestly almost very similar to like a football player.
Yeah.
Like, you ever look at some of those old 70s 80s football players, big kind of curly mullety long hairs with mustaches and stuff like that was just kind of a thing. It's like 80s wrestling even to a certain degree. So like that's always something that's like, pretty cool with that. But you're right about that, because it's a very interesting serial killer dynamic too. Because while we mentioned Jeffrey Dahmer with how he behaved kind of in his private life when it came to these mannequins, his way of getting these women was actually very Ted Bundy, where Ted was known to be, well groomed, a smooth talker and very charming. So it's a very, very interesting, overall serial killer dynamic for a fictional movie that has very real life similarities, which I found to be particularly interesting.
Oh yeah. Like even in the movie where he goes to the bar and meets up with this kind of alternative kind of like gothy kind of girl and stuff like that. And she's kind of like, I don't know. And they're talking. And then 2 minutes later, she's like, hey, do you want to come to my house? And then brings him to the house. And you're like, okay. Like I said, his character in this movie is kind of like, okay, yeah, what's going on? I don't know. Kind of like, timid, very, very timid. And she's just basically like taking control of the whole entire time. She comes out, she's basically in a bra and panties, throws him on the bed. She's got a mirror above her bedroom, which that automatically tells you that she's a slut. And I'm not slut shaming anybody.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna give that as a warning. I'm not saying that I'm calling her a slut in the sense that that's a bad thing. You just know that you're in for a night of some crazy ass shit if you take a woman or a man home and they have a mirror above their bed. They're into some freaky shit. Like that's not your common normal person doesn't have a mirror above their bed, So like I said, I'm not shaming anything about her. Like, I'm all about the sluts. But
Yeah.
that's just an observation. A girl is down to fuck when she's got a mirror above her bed.
Yeah, but also, can we take a second to acknowledge just another fucked up, awesome character portrayed in cinema to Goodbye Horses?
Yep.
Can we just take a second to appreciate that the death of the alternative girl in this movie was done to the song Goodbye Horses, popularized by Silence of the Lambs? I feel we have to take a moment to appreciate and acknowledge that.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's like the whole entire time when she's listening. I mean, it's such an iconic song, such a great song. But it is a song that you think of two things. You think of Silence of the Lambs, and obviously the killings and stuff like that throughout that, or you think of Jay and Silent Bob with Jay with his shit tucked, dancing to that song. So it's kind of like this movie is kind of like a combination of both, because you have the girl dancing to it, which is she's not naked, but she's scantily clad, and then you have the serial killer listening to it. So it's kind of like a combination of Silence of the Lambs and Jay and Silent Bob in that one scene.
Absolutely. And so as the movie plays on, it is that traditional serial killer style. I mean, to be honest, there's not a ton of like straight up substance when it comes to this movie. It's very simplistic. But to be honest, I kind of appreciate that. The gore factor is very high. The deaths and kills in this movie are very violent. So people that have a bloodlust or have an insatiable appetite for that kind of stuff are definitely going to be entertained. I mean, you've got the one girl who gets almost Pet Cemetery style Achilles cut, and then she's just brutally stabbed to death. Then you've also got the guy who's basically trying to save the hero girl, it would seem, to take a full-on meat cleaver to his mouth and still try to put up a fight after that, until he's thrown right through a wooden door. But then, you've got the drowning that leads to a scalping. You've got the opening 6 minute scene where he straight up tells this girl, "You're beautiful, but don't scream." And the second she goes to scream, that knife goes up through her mouth and into her brain. Like, it's a brutality thing. And that was always a big thing about the original Maniac from 1980. And a lot of people might also not even know that movie was banned in multiple countries for the amount of gore it had. Dominantly, of course, the scalping of young women. It wasn't even just about the murdering of them. It was the vicious scalping of these women. So that original Maniac set the bar quite high as far as as a scary, gore film. And I thought this movie did very, very well with it. That schizophrenia, that bipolar, that do you just want to be loved? Do you just want to kill? Do you need to find a happy medium? Are you really obsessed with this girl, or is she just another plaything? It's definitely out there. And so when it came to remakes, I really did like this movie for the sake of it stuck to the normal parameters that would make it a remake of the original, but did put its own flair on. I did like the changing of the point of view, which is funny because I'm very hit or miss when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like movies that are traditionally shot like through a video camera, where something like Diary of the Dead, which I'm using as an example as we move towards your movie, are typically movies that honestly I despise because I just can't get into them. It's a struggle for me. And again, I'm only speaking for myself. I know people who love those movies that are shot that way. Diary of the Dead, Blair Witch, stuff like that. For me, they're a struggle. It's very difficult for me to keep the fantasy. But anyway, I liked the point of view style, and maybe because it's more from the eyes with the hands doing the brutality, as opposed to just simply watching it through a video camera, almost like you're watching a movie through another movie screen, is probably one of the reasons why I attached a little bit more to it in an enjoyable way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, this movie, like you said, the way that it's shot reminds me of a very small scene in the movie, but the original Halloween, where you have Michael Myers killing the sister, and you see him go to the kitchen, get the knife, put on the mask, and it's all shot within the perspective of him. And that's pretty much most of this movie, at least the parts when he starts getting into his schizophrenia, when he's going around and killing people. I mean, like I said, and that's the cool thing about this movie too, it jumps back and forth where it's not fully a point of view movie, but it's mainly like when it gets to the parts where he's gonna start doing something, or he starts getting a little bit crazier, or you start getting into his head. That's when it changes that point of view, because it makes you feel like, okay, now we're inside of his head, and now we're gonna see things how he sees it. And that basically is the premise of this movie. Whenever he's killing these women and putting the wigs on the mannequins, he thinks that these women are real people. He talks to them like they're real. He sees them as real.
Yeah.
They're not legitimately real, because obviously he just whacked the shit out of them. But in his mind and his schizophrenia and the paranoia that he has, he sees these women as real people. He has real conversations with them. He has one that's laying in his bed that basically is his sleeping partner, or his girlfriend, as he called her, the one scene. So yeah, so it's like I like the whole concept and the idea around the real workings, because there are people out there that have schizophrenia, have dementia, or have post-traumatic stress disorder, that do see inanimate objects as real things. And that's kind of kind of cool to see it in a horror movie like this. I mean, ultimately, as we talk towards the end of the movie, it kind of is in his demise a little bit, but really depends on how you see it.
For sure. And it's also very cool too, because like there's also a very cool subtle nuance between your movie and my movie that again will go into the detail of how it is involved in your movie. But the original like makeup and special effects director of the 1980s Maniac was Tom Savini, who is very involved in your movie, which we'll get into very shortly. But I think that's actually just very, very cool, which I had forgotten about. Because I watched Maniac again to review for our episode, but I like the original Maniac a lot too, so I watched that also, and I had forgotten that Tom was in charge of the special effects makeup for the original Maniac, which I thought was very, very cool. But yeah, I mean that the overall, serial killer style, chasing down the victims, not letting them get away, but even like the victims fighting back, because even after, you'd think the lack of a better term, heroin girl, you'd think she's kind of getting away, because even though her friend is brutally murdered trying to save her, she kind of gets away, and then you see what you thought was her running Elijah over with the car. His character's name's Frank, by the way. Running Frank over with her car. All she does after that is lose control and crash into a pole that basically ultimately kills her, because it leads to her death at his hands. But he kind of gets up and walks off the impact, despite the fact that it flipped him around pretty good, obviously getting hit by a car, which it's just kind of crazy with that kind of stuff. And it leads to, obviously her murder, her ultimate scalping, as it bridges into the closing scenes in his apartment, of where his schizophrenia and his visions and the way he sees the world is very real and very graphic, but completely different to what actually happened at the end of the movie.
Yeah. Because that's where a lot of people, like, depending on how you want to see it and how you want to view it, the movie does end with all these mannequin women coming to him and basically tearing him apart and killing him. And, some people will go, well, did the mannequins really come alive? And it's like, no, he was already dying from the injuries that he got from being ran over and just basically brutally hit and stuff, all that stuff like that. He was dying. So in his head, while he was dying, he was being what ultimately would probably be his greatest kink or greatest thing ever, was to have these women basically kind of kill him. So in his mind, he was portraying these women coming after him and kind of getting their revenge. But in reality, he just died in his house.
Right.
Because when the cops come, you see him, in his mind, he's getting torn apart, he's getting ripped up, he's getting, brutally murdered. When the cops come into the place, he's just laying there dead, and you see the mannequins and all that. But yeah, he's intact.
Yeah,
So
because
you know
his
that it's
face
just,
was being ripped off by the
Yep.
mannequins, like his arms were being broken and ripped like out of their sockets and stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it's definitely, as almost kind of like spit on your grave style. It's like kind of a fantasy wet dream for revenge on a killer, or
Yeah.
even something a little bit more comedic, like the very end of like a movie like Death Proof from the
Yeah.
Grindhouse, where they chased down this guy who was trying to kill them and basically just whipped his ass all the way to the end of the movie. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting thing, especially with and it's a very interesting demographic. It's also a very interesting topic of thought of how the brain reacts in death.
Yeah, because like I said, in his mind, it definitely was real, and he was being murdered and killed by these women. But it goes to show, like, with his schizophrenia and his brain way, the way it works, it was the ultimate way for him to die was, like I said, was to have these women brutally murder him, which was, I thought was just really, really cool. I thought it was a cool ending.
Absolutely, for sure. So what do you think, man? Let's get into the obituaries. Let's get into the kill count for how we think mannequin. One of Devil's guilty pleasures. Maybe we'll get into detail of that some other time. But let's talk about Maniac and how we rank it and how we look at it for the obituaries. So here's the thing for me. I stand by the fact that I do think the movie is incredibly basic. But again, I think that actually does play to its strength. I love the simplistic factor about it. Minimal cast, not counting extras when they're in bars and stuff like that. But overall, very minimal cast and very minimum concept. Basically this serial killer guy. That's what he does, kind of Jack the Ripper style. He goes out, he sees somebody, he finds a victim. He does what he needs to do to either get them alone or get them just away from somebody. Goes about handling his business and then takes a memento, like back to his apartment to fulfill his fantasies of having women all around him. It doesn't get high marks for that. But what I did like about this remake is the fact that it went a little bit outside the box. It had very unique kills, very unique gore, but also went a little bit extra as far as tweaking it a little bit. So it didn't feel like you were super watching another version of the original movie. I did think Elijah did a fantastic job. I really enjoyed his acting and his portrayal on it. While it's tricky to give a guy super high props when you only get to see him for half, maybe even a third of the movie, I still liked the way he handled himself. I liked the way his lines were delivered. I liked the way they came across. So I thought it was very good. So in general, while I do think that the movie is basic and average, and I think it's about a 7 when it comes to movie overall, I am going to give it a bonus half point to a 7.5 because I did like the fact that it tweaked it a bit and allowed it to have a little bit more uniqueness to it by changing just enough to not necessarily knock it out of the Maniac catalog, but allow it to be a little bit more ability for it to stand on its own 2 feet. So 7.5 is how I see it.
Oh yeah. I agree with you with all those points. The fact that, like, we didn't even mention it, the fact that you were talking about you don't get to see Elijah a lot in this movie. He had to go back and record a lot of his dubbing of the vocals and stuff like that because you're hearing him from that point of view, so he had to record it like that. But he also was on set the whole entire time behind the camera a lot of times, so it made the other actors feel like he was there because he was really there, where he could have just been like, I'm going to be in my trailer, and you don't really need me for these parts. So you got to give him kudos for, like, even though he didn't need to be there, he felt like his presence there would make a better and more compelling story, and or make the actors act a lot better than just acting to a guy with a camera in their face.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, like I said, when it comes to remakes, like I said, I do put a lot of praise on this one. I mean, I do love the original one, and I do love this movie. I think I like the more modernized. I'm for movies being remade that can be done just as good or better if they have that ability, where this one is one. You could definitely do a lot more stuff nowadays than you could then. And like you were saying, the graphics and stuff like that back then were so shocking, where it's still shocking now, but when some of the stuff you've seen in movies now, it's not nearly as shocking as seeing what back then in the 80s when this came out. Like I said, people probably really thought that Tom Savini was probably cutting someone's head off for real because it looked really good. But yeah, like I said, I love this movie. I love the fact that Elijah kind of went out of his norm, where he normally does, and does this movie, and portrayed a serial killer and portrayed a guy with schizophrenia and like those tendencies of real serial killers very well.
Yeah.
He was very convincing in this movie. So yeah, I mean, I agree with everything. I was gonna say I would give it myself a 7.5 as well. Like you
Cool.
said, I'd give it a 7, like you said normally, but like adding those extra things, giving that extra bonus point because most remakes tend to not be as good or usually horrible versus their original ones. So, usually we give bonus points to the originals, but this time, giving that bonus point to this one because it had the ability and the balls to take a movie that's very controversial in the 80s and is still controversial now and just going for it, full slice.
Absolutely, sliced and diced. So that's the way it's going to be, Fangs. We're going to call this an even for 7, as even as far as Vampire and Devil. We're going to give this a 7.5 for 2012's Maniac with Elijah Wood. Devil, let's kick it right to you, man, because we got a second movie to discuss in this showdown, and that is your pick for a high-quality remake.
Yeah. So, like you were saying, even announced to me to begin with, because I completely forgot that, we were talking about Tom Savini doing the makeup for the original Maniac. This movie that's the 1990s version of Night of the Living Dead
Are you Night of the Living Dead under there?
from George Romero was directed by the one and only Tom Savini too. And he's come out to say, like, people before, like, why are you going to try to touch a classic? You're not allowed to touch a classic. People are like, you're insane. And if anybody was going to do it, Tom was going to do it. There are other reasons why it was done. I mean, there were some copyright problems with the original one, and that's why they decided to do this one so they can keep it in house and be able to do it. But like I said, I think Tom just kind of wanted to go, hey, I've grown in my ability to make good horror movies and make good, cool, gruesome stuff. Let's why not keep it in house and remake that? And I myself love this movie. I am one of the few people that will say that this movie is actually better than the original one, and that's nothing against the original movie because I'm a huge George Romero fan. I lived in Pittsburgh for many years, and got to meet George a few times, and I've told him that I thought that this movie was a better version of his movie, and people were looking at me like, why the hell would you say that? But he actually agreed with me. He loved this one. He thought Tom did a good idea. So anyway, let's just get right into the movie first then.
Yeah, but also real quick, brother, before you continue, it's also important for us to keep in mind and mention real quick when it comes to Tom, he had so much experience with the Of the Deads even before this, not only as special effects, but even acting in a few of them from Dawn and Day.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I said. He's basically like, even in this movie, there are, a lot of the people who worked on the original Night of the Living Dead that came in and did this. So it was very built in the same way that the original one was. It was just kind of like, let's see if we can modernize it a little bit more. And that's basically what he did.
Absolutely, my friend. So take it away. Let's rock.
Yeah. So, yeah. So anyway, yeah, we get into this movie. And like I said, I mean, kind of like Maniac where, Maniac kind of changes a little bit of things. It's not completely a newer movie. This movie kind of sticks pretty good to the original concept and the original idea. I mean, there are some tweaks, and we will talk about those tweaks. But I mean, as far as movie being shot and remade, it's pretty close to being almost exactly the same. I mean, it definitely, like I said, it definitely has points where it's different, and we will get into that. But anyway, I love this movie.
No, absolutely, man, for sure. I mean, the thing for me that I really do love about this movie, and I've seen it a bunch, but you obviously when you prepare to talk about a movie, you notice things a little differently and you see things a little bit differently. And I don't mean that like it changes your opinion or changes your thoughts. But the one thing when I was watching this movie the other day is I was like, fuck, man, the cast are legends now. And it's crazy, because you've got Tony Todd, of course, the Candyman, let alone The Rock, let alone The Crow, let alone amazing stuff. Then you've got Bill Moseley. I mean, dude, Chop Top, Otis Driftwood, the whole Firefly trilogy, let alone just various stuff with Rob Zombie and many other things. Myself and Mrs. Vamp are huge Repo the Genetic Opera fans. And my God, do I love him in that movie. Is it as Luigi. It's just like amazing in that movie. But anyway, the actors that have been in this, while the cast is very solid and very good, you've got standout actors who have gone on to become just the names of the genre.
No, yeah. I mean, to even mention some of the other ones, the guy in the original movie that was the asshole. The asshole in this one's Tom Towles, who was also in a bunch of He's been in a bunch of Rob Zombie movies. He was in House Thousand of Corpses. And you have Patricia Tallman, who was mainly a kind of a stunt woman sort of for a while, but then she was in she was in a bunch of the Star Trek movies, and she was also in a previous George Romero movie, Night Riders. That's why basically she got casted for this, and I like it because like in this version of it, we kind of switched the roles where she is the heroine of this movie. She's the main kind of character where like in the original one, you get to meet Barbara right away,
Yeah.
but she kind of becomes a secondary character when she gets to the house, which with the character that Tony Todd's portraying in the movie, where they kind of both take the role of the main person in this movie and kind of both take control of the reins of this movie.
Absolutely, for sure. And it's not as taboo in 1990, but it's also worth taking a second to just kind of talk a little bit about Tony Todd's character, Ben. And what I mean by that is I'm actually referencing Ben from the original Night of the Living Dead, because at that time, when you look back and it's like, the late 60s, when you look at Dwayne Jones, who played Ben in that movie, of a black lead was not a thing.
Yeah.
In film, not as much in general, but especially not in the horror genre. Like that was just not something that was done.
Yeah, and like throughout like I said, it being a '60s movie, the movie has a lot of the undertone with all the protesting and the war, and then also a lot of racial tension throughout the movie, which this movie definitely dives into it a little bit, but not nearly as much because I mean the original one is basically kind of like the whole entire idea is behind the whole unrest of people, where in this one, like I said, it's definitely still got its moments of that throughout the whole entire movie, but yeah, it's definitely a different feel. But like I said, yeah, but going right into it, it's you start off with Bill Moseley's character as being her brother, and you got the iconic "They're coming to get you, Barbara." And I love it. And it's like I said, it starts off pretty much almost exactly how the original one does. You
Right.
see a guy coming over the hill, and he's like, "Oh, there's one of them right there," And then all of a sudden, the real zombie comes out of nowhere and attacks. Where I don't know where the hell he came from. All of a sudden, he comes out of nowhere and attacks him and knocks him over, and it kills him in the head and stuff like that. And then you have the zombie picking up the rock and smashing it in the window, which I like. Is kind of crazy because in this movie and in the original one, I think a little bit more in this one, the zombies were a little bit more or they didn't call them zombies, they call them the undead, the ghouls. But in this movie are a little bit more capable of doing things,
Yeah, they
You know,
still had
and
a little bit more brain function.
yeah, because there's a part where they're trying to get in the house, and you see them turning the door, the doorknob a little bit, and you're like, oh, what the hell? And but yeah, it's that ability to be able to do stuff. It's because they're the recently deceased, so maybe they still got a little bit motor skills versus like what they could do back in the '60s. What compared to what they could do in the '90s were completely two different things.
Right, almost similar to like if we reference another very popular zombie movie like Return of the Living Dead, where that movie was based more about long deceased corpses coming back to life, where there's a reason why their motor skills really aren't there anymore, or they're having a hard time remembering things. So all they really know is I'm hungry, brains. That's just really all they know. Versus, yeah, this is much more, the recently deceased, where, yeah, I think you're right. There definitely are or can be more motor skills, more functionality, just more stuff that they remember as it's still a little bit fresh. Because they even talk about that in movies like Dawn of the Dead, both the original and the remake, where like they kind of are going to the mall because it's kind of what they remember from their day-to-day life and stuff. But anyway, when it also comes to the 1990 Night of the Living Dead, one of the things I also do like is the way certain kills that are well remembered were kind of amped up a little bit. Not crazy over the top, but we're amped up a little bit. Like that opening kill, kind of kill where, they fall and kind of hit their head on the corner of like that tombstone to kind of, where it's more a little bit more meek, like a little bit more tame. But then in this one, when they fall forward, they get just chin checked the fuck out of them, like just neck broke back style, just an aggressive just hit on the edge of that tombstone where you just see the head snap back, as opposed to that earlier one that I mentioned, which was a little bit more of, I guess, what you would call kind of a glancing blow.
Yeah, but I mean, for all you DVD aficionados, the best part of that whole entire kill is if you pause it frame by frame when he hits it. It's such a bad dummy of Bill Moseley's character. It's almost comical to the fact of like what Tom Savini can do as far as being special effects. I think he kind of just did that as like a joke almost, because it's like when you see later on some of the stuff and some of the special effects and the graphics and stuff like that, it's like, really, we're getting a dummy in this part.
Right. And I mean, yeah, I guess I understand to a certain degree where it's like, well, by having the softer neck or the flimsy whatever, you really get that snap to it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's like, bitch, they've got ballistic gel torsos nowadays that they train doctors on that are made of jelly that completely react like a real core, like a real body, a real human. And it's
Yeah.
just like, come on, bro. You really needed to reduce Bill Moseley of all people to a plushie.
Yeah, and then like I said, there's this, and then like I said, the bringing in the characters in this. Like I said, when you first see Tony Todd, which is kind of funny and kind of ironic if you watch it now versus when it happened at the time. You see in the '90s, if you watch this movie, you saw Tony Todd, which at this time this was his first horror film. He had done some films before, but this is his first horror film. You see him with a crowbar that's kind of resemblance of a hook.
Yeah.
And then like now you look at it and you're like, when you watch it now, you're like, oh wow, like they kind of knew that he was going to be Candyman before anybody else knew he was going to be Candyman.
Right.
But yeah, like they get into the house, and the same thing. You're trying to board up this house, and I always laughed about that part because it's like, yeah, you need to protect the house as much as you can, but you do realize that all that banging around the whole entire time is the reason why these undead ghouls, zombies have come to your house. Because this house isn't like, it's not like you're in the middle of Metropolis. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's no reason for any of these ghouls to be even coming around that area whatsoever. But because the fact that you've been banging for a whole entire day trying to board up a house, you're basically just ringing the dinner bell.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, feed, feast, come
Yep.
and get it.
Yeah. You're just basically just ringing that dinner bell like, hey, we got living things here that you want to eat, so hey, come check it out. But anyway, that's just it's such a great iconic house and such a cool, just a cool look to it. Like I said, when the undead are coming through, they're doing all this kind of stuff like that, and then you go and you find the characters that are been in the house in the basement. That's where you meet Tom's house character and his wife and the daughter, like in the original one, that had been bitten. But like I said, they don't know what's going on. So, us as zombie, lovers and lovers of this genre and this movie know that if you're bitten, eventually you're going to turn into one of them. They didn't know. They just thought it was, they didn't even know what was going on. They didn't even know there were dead people. They just thought some crazy maniac tried to bite her. So they were like, yeah, but ultimately she rises from the grave and gets a little bit of snacky snack time.
Absolutely, for sure. So let's just talk a little bit quick comparison of the first two movies where you've got Maniac that does do a little bit more to stand alone from its predecessor versus Night of the Living Dead, which really kind of rides even with the way that it goes, from kind of the way the characters act, the way that the kills are done, as well as the basic story arc are much more parallel, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, getting into that, like, the only difference between this movie and the, like you said, in the original, where like those little extra nuances, like Barbara's character is more of a badass in this movie. She's taking control. She is the final person in the movie that survives. Where Tony Todd's character, Ben, gets killed in this movie. He gets killed in the original one, but he gets killed, them mistaken, which you can either figure it out, the ending of the original Night of the Living Dead, you kind of figured, is it because he was mistaken as a zombie, or did they shoot him because of him being a black man? So a
Right.
lot of that was kind of like, the racial tension between that movie was like, where this one, obviously when they come to the house and they're trying to, they're killing all the zombies and getting the dead, out of the house. He comes out, Ben comes out, and he's a full on zombie, which gets killed.
Right.
Then, like I said, that's the difference. And then, like I said, in the original one, both the parents die. In this one, Tom Tow's character survives, and I love this part of the movie because all of a sudden he comes out and he's like, sees Barbara and he's like, "Oh, you came back for us," and she's just like, bang, right in the head. Goes to the people and goes, another one for the fire. So
Yep.
yeah, there's definitely, like, like I said, it was, the movie was almost kind of shot for shot. Kind of reminds me of a movie that, a lot of people don't realize or haven't seen, but you do the original Psycho, and then you do
That was
the remake.
definitely
You
that
do
was
the remake
definitely going to be
Psycho.
brought. That was definitely going to be brought up. I
Yeah,
was.
yeah, where that version is basically almost exactly shot for shot, but there are smaller things in that movie that make it different. And like that's what how this movie was. It was very reminding me of like a Psycho remake. A lot of people didn't like the Psycho remake. I personally like the Psycho remake. Is it as good as the Hitchcock one? No. That's the one I will probably go for. But like I said, anyway. But yeah, it is done very well. And as far as almost, not nearly as much as Psycho, because Psycho is pretty much almost frame for frame, other than a couple of those little extra pieces they put in. And a lot of that had to do with, the times. You could get away with doing things now that you couldn't at that time. And Hitchcock wouldn't be able to do 90% of the stuff that he could do now. I mean, could you imagine? That kind of stuff was like, it was even taboo to see a girl in a shower being killed in Psycho, and you don't even see anything.
Yeah. No, for sure, because I'm definitely with you on that. Because yeah, I'm honestly I'm with you too. I do like the remake of Psycho. I do. I also happen to like Vince Vaughn, but I do like
Yeah.
the movie in general. If you're gonna put me in a conversation about Psycho versus Psycho, Psycho number 2 is going to go down in flames. It's just going to get beaten to death. Like, because there's a lot of just in comparison when you are putting up this Psycho versus Hitchcock's Psycho. It's like watching Mike Tyson fight an infant. It just wouldn't be. It's not a fair fight. It's not a fight at all. But as far as the movie, I enjoy it. I like it just fine. It's in the other room, it's all good. But yeah, so as we move towards the obituaries and the kill count for Night of the Living Dead, let's talk briefly about the ending of Night of the Living Dead, because again, like you made mention, Barbara is much more of a badass, the standalone, the character that survives and kind of sets the final tone.
Yeah. So, she does go out. She realizes, like, hey, these, undead ghouls, zombies are pretty slow and stupid. We can just run and get away from them. They're like, no, we need to protect the house. And so, eventually when shit goes sour, she does run off and she goes and finds, the militia that are just like in the original, the militia that come around. Of course, that's the funny part of this movie is, the part of Pennsylvania it's very hunting. So these guys are like, woohoo, but, a bunch of good old boys that are all about it. And that's what I love about this movie too. Like when it first started in this movie, they get to the house and they see all the dead animal heads all over the walls. If you're in note to people, if you're in a horror movie and zombies are coming alive and you see a house that looks like that, you're in a good place because those people have guns. If you see trophies on the wall of dead animals, they're hunters, and there's going to be guns and weapons, and that's a house where if you go against somebody who's like, no knocking any vegans, but if you go to a vegan's house, they're not going to have weapons to help you survive a zombie attack.
Right. It's like in Tremors. Like you wanted to go to Ed's house.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got the big guns. He's the crazy survivalist, doomsday prepper kind of guy. And like, yeah, those guys, in general get made fun of. But when the shit hits the fan and crazy shit like that happens, maybe not in real life as far as it, but in the realm of these kind of movies, those kind of guys are perfect. I mean, they're crazy. You don't want to kind of be around them much, but they're good to have by your side a little bit. Because I'd rather have somebody who's got 16 guns on them than someone who's going to try to kill these zombies with a fork or some shit.
Yeah, exactly. You might not go over to their house, for Sunday night dinner, but you're gonna make sure that every year you send them a Christmas card, just in case.
just in case.
Absolutely, brother. So let's go into the obituaries, man. Let's talk about the kill count and how we like it for Night of the Living Dead 1990, directed by Tom Savini. Take it away, brother. Why don't you start this one off, of course?
Yeah. So like you were saying, in the previous section where we were talking about Psycho, obviously the remake of Psycho is good. I like it. People don't like it, but it doesn't hold a candle to the original Psycho. Hitchcock is somebody you can't touch. And George Romero is considered one of those directors that you can't touch. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but like I said, I feel like this is a better, superior version of the movie. Like I said, I mean, and that's no disrespect to Romero or any of the guys in the original movie, but like I said, it was a different time. It was different things. You couldn't do things as much as you could do. You couldn't be as graphic. I mean, that movie is in the black and white. George Romero is pretty graphic. Those zombie ghouls are eating what would be considered dead people. And when you watch that in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, that was pretty gnarly and probably made people who, I mean, I don't think a lot of people went and seen it in the theaters, but people who did see it in the theaters or saw it later on, were probably like, oh my God, this is disgusting. But, like I said, as time goes on and the movies get more violent and more violent and violent becomes a little bit more more acceptable in your household, it was due for a remake. And I think at that time, and like I said, if you're going to get a remake, why not, have somebody who is a Pittsburgh guy who's worked with Romero. Romero was on the set a lot of times as a consultant while they were making this movie and stuff like that. He was a producer of this movie. So, it's not like Savini did this movie behind Romero's back and was like, "Hey, I'm just going to make a better, superior movie than you." He had George Romero's, seal of approval the whole way through. So, and it's like, and Romero probably could have directed it again, but maybe he felt like, yeah, I already did it once. Let me give it to somebody else and see if how they feel about the story, or how they feel about shooting it this way or shooting it that way. And like I said, I like that. And I, commend Tom for, having the balls to touch a classic that, most people felt like should never be touched. But so like I said, I put this in high regards. Like I said, the original one is the the mother of all zombie movies or undead movies and stuff like that. So, and George Romero, we will talk about later on, is just one of those directors that is bar none probably the one of the greatest directors of all time, especially in the horror genre. But yeah, I mean, for me, like I said, the original I would probably give it like a high, but this one I give high guards because I love it. I like the fact that it's in color. I love the color of it. I love the fact that it's bloodier, it's gorier, it's grittier. It's still got that comedy. It's still got that all the stuff that the original one you loved, but that little extra Tom Savini swag into it. So yeah, I mean, for me, I give this movie an 8.5 because I just love this movie.
Okay, cool, man. I can definitely understand all of that. I don't quite see it that way, and that's okay. Again, I think it's solid. I definitely think it's a quality movie. In general, my biggest thing about this movie is the fact that, similar, like we discussed multiple times now, like Psycho, it's so parallel to it. And I think it hurts the movie in my eyes just a little bit because of that, because it's so similar. Like, it's very similar shot for shot, very similar line for line. But even some of the comedy, like Oops, as we discussed, where it's like, come on, Tom, you could have done way better with Bill's kill. So overall, if I'm being hypercritical, I look at it as more of like a 6.5, but I don't feel it deserves to be that low because of the fact that the cast is who they are leading up to their careers. The fact that, again, Tony Todd became Tony Todd, Bill Moseley became Bill Moseley, and so many of the other, like, lesser characters still went on to have quality careers both in and outside the genre. So it does get an extra point for that for me. It really does, like an extra half point for me. So 7 is where I do see this movie. It's where I feel most comfortable ranking this movie. While I definitely enjoy it, it's a solid movie, 100%. It's that really riding the parallel is one of the reasons why I personally rank it below Maniac, because Maniac did enough, in my opinion, to change and be more unique, a little bit more original, which is funny to say when it comes to remake movies, but that's okay. So now here's the deal. Between you and me, that would actually put this as a 7.75, which, as our fangs know and you and I know, is something that we don't do. We don't waste our time with 0.25s and 0.75s, which means we have a direction that we can go on this. So I personally would slide it towards a 7.5, again, a little bit lower, because there's a little bit uniqueness to Maniac. Why do you think it would slide to an 8?
Well, I mean, you basically almost kind of answered your own question. So for that, like I said, bumping it up, where if we can go down to 7.5, it would match Maniac. And like I said, or we can decide to bump it up a little bit more to beat Maniac. Maybe because of the, we can't do it because of their, originality. Both of them are remakes. You can't do the, this and that. But like you said, cast wise, if you look at cast wise Maniac, Elijah Wood is basically it. And Elijah Wood was already a established actor doing a movie that he wouldn't normally be doing most of the time. Where Night of the Living Dead has these actors that are huge now. You know what I mean? You have, like you said, you have Tony Todd. This is his horror debut. That guy has done 9 billion horror movies now. You have Bill Moseley. He was in a bunch of movies, but this basically launched his career. So, like you said, it launched so many careers versus that. But then again, I mean, understandably, you're looking at a huge gap, 90s to 2012. So
Yeah.
obviously, that's why it's gonna have that drastic character build up or actor build up because it's had a lot more years to build up. But I don't know. How do you feel about that?
You know what?
About bumping it up just because of the careers that it did, and the wonders that it did for Tom and for all the actors.
Sure. No, I'm with you on that one, and I'm cool with that, and I'll tell you why. Because here's the other thing too. If Night of the Living Dead had a average cast, and we were still having this discussion, everything still went just as normal, and it's still an 8.5 for you, and it's still a 7 for me. I would say it should be a 7.5. I think it should go down to that, again, because of the parallels, because I think they do speak volumes. And then we would have to continue our discussion. Well, now it's a tie. We need a winner. And again, based on our styles and our beliefs, originality does tend to get that little boost. And I think that would give Maniac the win in that scenario. But considering that this movie enhanced and aided the overall building and trajectory of the genre due to the casting, is why I'll give it to you, and do agree that I think that extra quarter point to an 8 is the way it should be and the way that we'll do it. Because again, Tony gave us so much more. Bill gave us so much more. And Tom Savini continued on as well. Not that he wasn't going to still be a thing. I mean, he's the mastermind behind so much gore. But there's a little bit more in the betterment of the genre that you got from, while I still think Maniac is a superior movie in this comparison of it, Night of the Living Dead did more for the genre. So
Yeah.
that's how I see it, and that's why I agree. And so if you're down, I think 8's fair. I think it's the way to go. And if you're cool with it, I'll call it Fatality. That gives Night of the Living Dead 1990 the slim, and this has been our closest debate so far, but a slim yet still victory over 2012's Maniac. Are you down?
Yeah. Because like I said, both movies are like you said, dude. They're the cream of the crops towards remake movies, and we knew it was gonna be a tight race, but ultimately the ghouls won.
Absolutely, because we can also do more in-depth stuff, of course, when it comes to, like I said, like earlier, about like the writers of like Maniac, with like the amazing movies that they had to do with. But the fact of the matter is, that would be splitting hairs between two big horror fans that are just duking it out like two heavyweights. That's not going to be helpful in the big picture to our fangs, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, we'll save that for some other fun discussions, as I'm sure we'll get into writers, and of course we definitely have directors on the horizon and stuff like that. So Ghouls and Goblins, Spooks and Creeps, that is the way it's going to be. We are going to write it up on the obituaries. Fatality, Victory to the Devil, Night of the Living Dead 1990. takes out Maniac of 2012. A close one, but again, victory to the devil. There can be only one. Tonight it was Night of the Living Dead. Horns up, fangs out.
Hello, ghouls and fiends. Happy World Goth Day. That means we must have a new episode of Coffin Nails for you. We're going to talk about Fangs Out from 2023. This was painful, guys. I am really sorry to tell you. I was super stoked on this one because I really love the idea of the concept. Basically, these kids are going to Mexico to get inexpensive, like, plastic surgery, and the doctors and nurses are vampires, and they use that to harvest new victims. Dude, it should have been a killer concept because that makes super sense for, vampires to get victims. Bad acting, like watered down tomato juice blood, bad CGI, horrible reaction. It's just not good. The fact of the matter is, it's going to get a 3 from me because I did make it through the movie. So I can't bash it to death, but it's just not good, very poor, and come on, vampires. Come on, new movie directors for vampires. You got to do better because you know that Salem will not tolerate shitty vampire movies. That's the way it's going to be. That is how it will stand for all of our beloved fangs. So horns up, fangs out, but thumbs down for 2023's Fangs Out.
I am the tree of knowledge, and I say watch the Vampire and Devil podcast. Hey, welcome back to that new section where we talk about horror comedies of the 80s. This time we're going to talk about 1989 Prince. Wow, have you seen this movie? It stars Randy Quaid. He's like a scientific killer, skriller, motherfucker diller, and he likes eating meat. We love talking about meat on this show. But anyway, it's a cool movie about a little kid whose parents, he decides, is a cannibalistic killers who like serving meat on their dinners. And guess what? The meat is not from the cows and not from the deers. It's from people like you. You should check it out. It's a good, fun comedy, and I love it because it's got blood and guts and creepiness and stuff like that. But yet, you should watch it. It's time to continue those who have died in the month of May. This time we honor these 3: Margaret Hamilton, the Wicked Witch of the West; Ray Liotta, who was in one of my favorite movies, Identity; and Dennis Hopper, who was not also an Easy Rider, but was in mistakenly my favorite Texas Chainsaw movie, Part 2. Oh, Lefty, we miss you. We miss all these 3. We honor those who have passed, but they will never be forgotten.